John chapter 8, the woman taken in adultery. Chapter 7 ends here, and chapter 8 begins with that disputed passage of the woman taken in adultery, the Pericope Adulterae. This passage is treated by many respected Bible teachers, like John MacArthur, as consistent with other Bible teachings and likely true, but without the guarantee of inspiration and inerrancy. Although many interpreters deem the story to be an unwelcome intrusion into the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is missing from some manuscripts here and is found in different locations in others, in light of the thesis of this course, it seems to be appropriate to locate it here in John. To counter one argument against its inclusion, we just saw in chapter 6, where John interrupted the accounts of the giving of the bread and that of the bread of life discourse with the scene of Jesus walking on water. Therefore, creating a chiasm within another short account does not indicate that the interruption does not belong. This incident opens with Jesus going up and coming back down from the Mount of Olives to the temple, where all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. John 8:2. It is subtle at this point, but we can see Moses even here as he ascended and descended on Sinai to come down and teach Israel God's words. The first time that Exodus details Moses' holding court, judging the cases for the people, which is in Exodus 18:13, he is sitting with the people gathered around, just as Jesus does in John 8. Exodus 18:13 says, "The next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening." By the end of this section in John, we will see even more clearly how alike are Jesus and Moses in this descent from the mount. Jesus' now constant opponents, the scribes and Pharisees, bring him the accused woman, and they say, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. John 8:4-6. In this pericope, Jesus is being tested as to those words of Moses. Moses teaches the statutes of God in Exodus 18 before they are written by the finger of God on stone. And Jesus gives his ruling, writing with the finger of God in the dust. We have alluded to the bitter waters a few times in relation to different cases of adultery, and now it's time to see them connected. In Moses' test for adultery, in Numbers 5:16-29, the priest wrote the curses for adultery in a book, and then washed or scraped them off into a cup of holy water. He also mixed some dust from the tabernacle floor into the water. The woman accused of adultery, but taken without a witness, would then drink from the cup. If she were lying and had been unfaithful, God would use the mixture to bring a physical curse upon her. If she were innocent, she would be unaffected and would be able to bear children. The water itself was not poisonous, and it had no effect on the innocent woman. In an anticipatory scene in the wilderness, God took Israel to be his bride, and they swore their vows to him at Sinai in Exodus 19. And then again in Exodus 24. Moses then went up the mountain and received the Decalogue, which was, in effect, the marriage contract between God and his people. Having ascended the mountain, he then descended to the people with God's words, again as Jesus did at the start of John 8. When he returned with the tablets, he caught them in the act of adultery, betraying God, their husband, by worshiping the golden calf they had made. Like Jesus in John 8, Moses was confronted with a test of adultery. Just as the priest in Numbers 5 scraped the words of the curse off the page, Moses threw the tablets of God's covenant on the ground and shattered them. Also, like that priest with the dust of the tabernacle floor, Moses then, quote, "took the calf they had made, burned it in the fire, ground it to powder, and scattered the powder over the face of the water. Then he forced the Israelites to drink it." Exodus 32:20. 3,000 were killed in punishment on that day of Pentecost. And as with the cursed woman in the Numbers passage, quote, "the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made." Exodus 32:35. At that point, Moses commissioned the Levites to execute judgments, asking, "Who is on the Lord's side?" Exodus 32:26. When Jesus asked the same thing of the people who brought the woman for judgment, none were found sinless, none were on the Lord's side, and so she had no executors left. In the judgment, some die and some do not. The innocent are spared and the guilty are condemned. Exodus 32:33 and 34 say, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." Now we come to Jesus, the Mosaic Messiah who just went up and down the mountain. As he is sitting, sharing God's words with the people, just as Moses did, he is called to adjudicate a case of adultery, just as Moses did. Jesus is pressured to condemn this woman publicly, or to call for a violation of Jewish law and disobedience to Moses. Instead, he writes words in the dust, reminding us of the priest with the curses in the tabernacle, and of Moses with the broken tablets on the ground. When he finally speaks, he says, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. John 8, 7 and 9. Although he is confronted with the adulterous woman, his judgment is against the men who brought her. We know that they are not free of sin because, as Jesus has charged repeatedly, they are the hypocrites who worship God with their mouths, but with their hearts far from him. From Exodus through the prophets, we see this failure to trust in God, and that it is the adultery of the religious class in Israel. Now these adulterers see the connection with the words written in the dust, and they do not want to bring the plague upon themselves, blotting themselves out of God's book by having to face him and bring their charge. They drop their stones along with the charges against the woman, and they leave. To further evidence that this passage is a judgment on Israel, and to connect it back to Moses one more time, we can also take a quick pass back through the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is condemning adulterous Israel to exile in Babylon, and recognizes, as do Isaiah and Jesus, that their religion is an insincere idolatry when he says to God, "You are always on their lips, but far from their hearts." Jeremiah 12:20. God responds of this adulterous wife that, "I will forsake my house, abandon my inheritance. I will give the one I love into the hands of her enemies." Jeremiah 12:7. Chapters 1 through 12 have been presenting a prophetic section, an oracle against Jerusalem, wherein Creator God rescued her in the wilderness and made her his wife. She rebelled time and again, engaged in insincere religious rites, committed adultery, and will not be heard in prayer, and finally will be devastated and sent into exile. Bringing this back to Jesus in the passage of the adulteress, we read where Jeremiah wrote in another section on the exile and punishment, quote, "I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind, to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve." Jeremiah 17:10. Jesus, as we have seen in John, needs nobody to tell him what people are thinking, because he knows their hearts. He has just declared himself the Messiah and the source of living water in their presence, and when he stoops to write in the dust, the Pharisees and experts in the law must recognize themselves in Jeremiah's statement. "Lord, you are the hope of Israel. All who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust, because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of living water." Jeremiah 17:13. Recall that this pericope is found in the account of the Feast of Tabernacles. It is at this feast, celebrating the giving of the water by the Lord, that Jesus has identified himself as the source of the water. He is Yahweh, the one who knows their hearts, the one who can blot them out of the book of life, who judges their adultery and will send them into exile. He is the new Moses, bringing and judging by the law and condemning the guilty. But he is also the Moses who will bring them back out of their enslavement. The oracles culminating in Jeremiah 12 end the cycle with God saying that, "After I uproot them, I will again have compassion and will bring each of them back to their own inheritance and their own country." Jeremiah 12:15. God wrote the first commandments on the tablets of stone with his finger. Jesus wrote in the dust in John 8, and then writes the law on our hearts with his Holy Spirit, the Spirit who is also called the finger of God in the Gospels.